Jazakumullah khair. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome to the day 11th of Tafseer Surah al-Mulk. Today, inshallah, we'll talk about verse number 17 and verse number 18. Yesterday, we talked about verse number 16, in which Qarun's punishment was mentioned or alluded to. In verse number 17, another azab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, another punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referenced or alluded towards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ أَمْ أَمِنْتُمْ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاءِ أَنْ يُرْسِلَ عَلَيْكُمْ حَاصِبًا فَسَتَعْلَمُونَ كَيْفَ نَذِيرٌ وَلَقَدْ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ فَكَيْفَ كَانَ نَكِيرٌ. Or have you become fearless of Him who is the creator of the sky? Or have you become fearless of Him who is above the sky? If He releases a violent wind, hasiba, yursilu alaykum hasiba, if He sends a violent wind as a punishment with stones, fasata'lamuna kayfa nadhir, so you will soon come to know how my warning is, or how my warning was. Right? وَلَقَدْ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ فَكَيْفَ كَانَ نَكِيرٌ. This violent wind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions over here is a reference towards the people of Ad. And we touched base a little bit yesterday, but we didn't have enough time, so inshallah we'll go a little bit deeper into the discussion of this. A brief history of the people of Ad is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Ad as Ada Ula. Ada Ula, the first Ad. Ada Ula is the first Ad. That means that there is Ad nation, that is Ad number 2. So Ad Ula is commonly referred as Ad, and the second Ad is referred as Thamud. And they are the grandsons. Their lineage goes back and merges at Nuh alayhi salam, right? And so this Ad, the first Ad, was the dwellers of the people who lived in the place called Iram Dhatil Mi'ad, right? They had, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them certain capabilities that others did not possess. So they became arrogant because of those blessings, basically, and they became ungrateful of that. Now, there are multiple names of these people. Ad, the people of Iram, right? They are also called the people of Hud alayhi salam, right? And they are also called Ad al-Awwal, right? Or Ad Ula. Mufti Shafi Usmani rahimahullah in his Ma'arif al-Qur'an discusses in detail the lineage and the background of this nation. And he says that the conclusion, who had two grandsons. One of the grandson became the people of Ad. The other grandson became the people of Thamud. So they both are cousins. The people of Ad and people of Thamud, they are cousins of each other. And their grandfather is one which is called Iram. And Iram is the name of the city because of the grandfather, right? So that's in a nutshell is the summary of their lineage. Now, and this is the fifth generation of Nuh alayhi salam. Fifth generation of Nuh alayhi salam. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in another place, Akhahum Huda in Surah al-A'raf, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Hud, who was their brother. Meaning Hud alayhi salam was coming from this entire lineage, right? So it was one of their own. He was one of their own. The strength that they possessed, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with, was they had immense physical strength. So much so that they were able to build lofty palaces and high palaces. They lived in the area that is now the Oman and Yemen area, the Hadramaut area. This is the area which was very fertile. So not only they had immense carvings of the mountains, and they had these tall buildings, palaces, they also, because of the fertile land, they had a lot of produce. So they were rich in produce and agriculture. A lot of, and because of that, they had a lot of cattle, right? So this entire economic system was making them very rich. They're physically strong, they're economically strong, they have all the things they want in terms of wealth. There's nothing that they are missing out. They're blessed to that extent, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Qur'an, زَادَكُمْ فِي الْخَلْقِ بَسْطَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, or gave you increased strength in physique. So the people of Ad were given immense strength in their physical physique. In Surah al-A'raf, which is chapter number 7, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala details this entire incident, right? If we go to Surah al-A'raf, verse number 65, for those who are tracking, verse number 65, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِلَىٰ عَادٍ أَخَاهُمْ هُودًا. And we sent to Ad, their brother, Hud alayhi salam, قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ أَفَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. Hud alayhi salam, he mentioned to his qawm, O my people, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ. Worship Allah alone. There is no ilah, there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except Him. أَفَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. Would you not fear Him? Would you not fear Him? قال الملأ الذين كفروا من قومه إنا نراك في سفاهة وإنا لنظنك من الكاذبين. The chiefs of the people, they rejected the message of Hud alayhi salam, and they said, الذين كفروا, those who disbelieved among the chiefs, they said to Hud alayhi salam that indeed, inna lanaraka, indeed, we definitely see in you that you're foolish. The people, the chiefs are calling Hud alayhi salam that you're a foolish person, you're ignorant person. Wa inna lanazunnuka min al-kadhibin, and we assume and we think that you are definitely a liar. قال يا قومي, Hud alayhi salam responded, O my people, laysa bi safahatun, I'm not the foolish one, walakinni rasulun min rabbil alamin. Rather, I am a messenger from the Lord of the worlds, right? I'm not the foolish one. أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي وَأَنَا لَكُمْ نَاصِحٌ أَمِينٌ. I am the one who delivers the message from my Lord, and I am to you nasihun amin, sincere, trustworthy advisor. Sincere, trustworthy advisor. أَوَاجِبْتُمْ أَنْ جَاءَكُمْ ذِكْرٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ عَلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنْكُمْ لِيُنذِرَكُمْ وَاذْكُرُوا إِذْ جَعَلَكُمْ خُلَفَاءَ مِنْ بَعْدِ قَوْمِ نُوحٍ وَزَادَكُمْ فِي الْخَلْقِ بَسْطًا فَاذْكُرُوا آلَاءَ اللَّهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Now, in this verse, Hud alayhi salam mentions, do you find this to be strange that to you came a person who reminds you regarding your Creator, your Lord, who was from amongst you? So basically, Allah subhanahu, you're worried, or you find this to be strange that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose a person from amongst you to remind you regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regarding your Creator, so that He can warn you. Remember, is ja'alakum khulafa'a min ba'di qawmi Nuhin. Now He's appealing to it because they know that they are from the descendants of Nuh alayhi salam, right? So Hud alayhi salam reminds them that remember when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you the khulafa of Nuh alayhi salam, yani successors of Nuh alayhi salam, right? Successors of Nuh alayhi salam. Remember that favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted. How was this a favor? Because the people of Nuh, they were destroyed. They were destroyed. Only a handful of people survived that flood, right? So these are the descendants of those handful of people. So Hud alayhi salam is reminding them that remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you as a favor, that your forefathers were protected because of their iman, right? And now you're doing the same mistake that the people of Nuh alayhi salam that God destroyed are committing, which is what? The shirk, right? So remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made, you can sit down. Sit down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you the khulafa after Nuh alayhi salam. After Nuh alayhi salam, He made you the successors upon earth, and wazadakum fil khalqi bastatan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala We have, mashallah, a lot of kids. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you increased strength. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted you increased strength in physique, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you physical strength. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not grant this blessing to other people. Therefore, فَاذْكُرُوا آلَاءَ اللَّهِ. Therefore, remember and be mindful of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has granted you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, so that perhaps you may become the successful ones. How do they respond? قَالُوا أَجِئْتَنَا لِنَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ وَحْدَهُ. You have come to us telling us that we should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. وَنَذَرَ مَا كَانَ يَعْبُدُ آبَاؤُنَا. And we should abandon those deities that our forefathers used to worship. Is that what you're calling us to? Worship Allah and abandon the deities that our forefathers used to worship? But you see, this is when people transgress, they pick and choose. Their forefathers, above 5th generation, is Nuh alayhi salam. And he was not a mushrik. He was muwahhid. Rather, he saved a handful of people who followed him. So their forefathers in reality are muwahhideen upon tawheed, but they don't want to choose that. They want to choose those as their forefathers who are mushrik, who are committing the same kind of mistakes, right? Because they want to stay in their comfort zone. They don't want to change themselves. So they are accusing Hud alayhi salam, you're calling us that we should only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and abandon the deities that our forefathers used to worship. فَأْتِنَا بِمَا تَعِدُنَا إِن كُنْتَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. Therefore, bring whatever you promise us, bring that. They're challenging Hud alayhi salam that bring the azab. You know, you keep warning us that if we don't listen to you and we don't believe in you, then Allah will send a reward and Allah will send azab and punishment. Where is that punishment? Bring that. Let's see what you got, right? قال, Hud alayhi salam said, قَدْ وَقَعَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ رِجْسٌ وَغَضَبٌ. Subhanallah. Hud alayhi salam said, indeed, the punishment and anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already come upon you. The fact that you're accusing your prophet that he's foolish, you're accusing your prophet that he's a liar, and you're accusing that your forefathers, you know, they were idol worshipper, which means they're accusing of Nuh alayhi salam as well, right? You're accusing all of these things, and then you're challenging that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, if I'm true, then let me bring that wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and punishment, then this state of yours is already punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This state of yours is already a punishment and wrath and anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is manifesting in you. And then they said, do you quarrel with me about mere names, about semantics that you and your fathers have invented themselves, and for which Allah has sent no authority. These deities that you call them with different names, you know, you invented these names for them, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted no authority to these idols, right? So wait, I am one of those waiting with you. You are waiting for the adhab of Allah, I am also waiting for the adhab of Allah. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decide this matter. Right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَنْجَيْنَاهُ وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ. Therefore, we saved him and those who were with him, Hud alayhi salam, بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنَّا, from our mercy. وَقَطَعْنَا دَابِرَ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا وَمَا كَانُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. And we eradicated those who rejected our signs, they were not the believers. Right? In Surah Fussilat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes provides another detail of this people, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا عَادٌ فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. As for the people of Ad, they became arrogant upon earth. بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ, without any right. What right did they have to become, arrogant? How dare they become arrogant upon earth? They had no right to become arrogant on earth, right? What are they arrogant about? What is this kibr coming from? Right? وَقَالُوا مَنْ أَشَدُّ مِنَّا قُوَّةً. And they are proud and arrogant about what? Who is more powerful than us? Allah granted them that physical health and physique. Now they are becoming arrogant and they are saying, challenging Hud alayhi salam, who is more powerful than us? Nobody can touch us. Nobody can touch us. Nobody can do anything to us. We are the most mightiest of races upon earth. Nobody can touch us. We are the nation that is untouchable. Nobody can do anything to us. Nobody can challenge us, right? They're they're intoxicated with power. They're intoxicated with arrogance. They're intoxicated with ungratefulness, right? And this is a challenge they're giving to Hud alayhi salam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ الَّذِي خَلَقَهُمْ هُوَ أَشَدُّ مِنْهُمْ قُوَّةً وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يَجْحَدُونَ. Did they not see that Allah, who created them, is stronger than them in power? Who is stronger? You're challenging Allah. Your creator is more powerful than you, right? And they used to reject our signs. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions فَأَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ رِيحًا صَرْصَرًا فِي أَيَّامٍ نَحِسَاتٍ لِنُذِيقَهُمْ عَذَابَ الْخِزْيِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَلَعَذَابُ الْآخِرَةِ أَخْزَى وَهُمْ لَا يُنصَرُونَ. Right? Then in verse number 16 of chapter 41, Al-Fussilat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so we let loose a wild, freezing, screaming wind. A wild, screaming, freezing wind. A frigid windstorm. How many over here from the north? You have experienced the snowstorm? Right? Okay, only 1 and 2. Myself? That's it? SubhanAllah. This is scary. Frigid storm, it's not only extremely freezing, rather it comes with a sound as well. It comes with a sound as well because the wind, this cold wind, when it touches the trees and these different objects on earth, it makes sound. So it becomes a little bit scary. But this is the adhab of Allah. What we are describing is the normal circumstance. This is the adhab of Allah. The adhab was extremely frigid cold wind with extreme scream. That scream in of itself was adhab and punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was a taste of humiliation in the present life. And of course the punishment of the hereafter will be much more humiliating and they will not be helped. What is sarsar? Sarsar is this. It's cold, frigid weather. And nahisat is the unlucky and unfortunate days. The people of Ad received this adhab, this punishment for 8 days and 7 nights. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah al-Haqqa that He imposed on them for 7 nights and 8 days consecutively. Straight for 8 days they will receive this adhab. Right? And there was nothing they can do. And then they were, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, كَأَنَّهُمْ أَعْجَازُ نَخْلٍ خَاوِيَةٍ. And they were thrown on the ground. They were on the ground as if they were trunks of hollow date palm trees. If imagine you cut all the date palm trees and they are just on the floor. This is how the people of Ad, every one last bit of this nation was on the floor, dead. The entire nation was eradicated. The entire nation was eradicated because of their arrogance, because of their pride, because of their kibr, because of their shirk, because of them rejecting the messenger and the message and calling the messenger foolish and liar. Right? Calling the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he's foolish and liar. It's one thing to reject. It's another thing to challenge Allah and ridicule the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the message. Right? May Allah protect us. So before this adhab came, for 3 years, the scholars mentioned, they had complete drought. No rain. For 3 years, they received no rain. The entire vegetation became desert. All the cattle, they died. They had no meat to eat. They had no fruits to eat, no vegetables to eat. They were experiencing drought. In some narrations, they actually went to Makkah at that time to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to uplift this punishment. And they were asking for water from the people of Makkah. They came to this point. They were begging other people, other nations, right? But no help came to them. And then for 8 days and 7 nights, this adhab came. And they were lifted into the air. This wind uplifted them from the earth and smacked them on the floor. And in Surah al-Haqqa, Allah explains they were just dead, lying on the floor, the entire nation, as if hollow trees that are cut down. Right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to in verse number 17 of Surah al-Mulk. In verse number 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ كَذَّبَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ فَكَيْفَ كَانَ نَكِيرٌ. And of course, those before them also rejected the truth. So how was my reproach and my censure? Right? The people that Allah's messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was preaching and they were rejecting.